In this video I'm going to walk you through the first two requirements of this problem, which is to prepare the physical flow of the units from A, and along with the equivalent units so that we can then later apply and calculate a unit cost. Now, just want to make sure that we're understanding that the way I'm going to show you to do this is the weighted average method. And it's significantly different from the FIFO method that we'll learn later. So as you're working through this problem and maybe reflecting back or referring back to it at a later time, remember this is using the weighted average method, and so therefore some of what we do is significantly different than the FIFO method. Okay, so let's just start off here. And what we're told up here is how many units we have at the beginning of the month, and they're partially completed. We have some units that were completed and transferred out during the month. And lastly, they tell us how many units are sitting in our ending inventory. Actually, this is an ending inventory, this is work in process. So how many units are sitting in work in process at the end of the month. And we're going to take that and convert that to this process physical flow of the units. So we know at the beginning of the month there were 15,000 units. We don't know how many were started during the current period, but we'll back our way into that. We do know for a fact that we completed and transferred out during the current period 90,000 units, because that's what we're told. We also know for a fact, because someone could go out and count this, that there are 30,000 units at some stage of completion. So what that means is at the end of the month, I know there are 90,000 I completed, plus 30,000 still in process. So we've accounted for 120,000 units. What I don't know is how many were started during the current period. But I do know that I have to account for the same number that I've accounted for. So this should also be 120,000. I can back my way into this started during the current period number by taking the difference between the 120 and the 15. So I know I have to have started during the period 105,000. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. That's the first requirement. Second, we're asked to compute the equivalent units. Now, if we were using the FIFO method, we would take this beginning work in process and compute it to an equivalent units for how much was complete and how much to get us the equivalent unit. We're not doing that for the weighted average method, because the weighted average method says, you know what, I understand you have some that are started and partially completed, but we're going to take all of those and squish them together with the ones we're starting in this current month, and we're going to take all those costs of that have already been incurred in these 15,000, and we're just going to come up with a big aggregate, a big average of those total costs. So that being said, we look down here to calculate the equivalent units. So if we've completed and transferred out during the current period 90,000 units, we make the assumption that 90,000 equivalent units have been completed in the month relative to materials and the conversion cost. Now this is important to just, you can't just gloss over this, because what this, your mind is saying, wait a minute, some of these were completed in the prior month, at least part of some of these were complete. That's right, they were, but using the weighted average method, we take them all and we lump them together. Even though some of these were in progress at the beginning of the month, all of them that are completed in the current month go into an equivalent unit calculation. But for the ending work in process, what we have is 30,000, and materials might be added at various stages of the production process. And in this case, we're told that all our materials, and this is logical, this is what normally happens, all materials are added at the beginning of the blending process. We dump all the yeast in, and all the hops, and all the barley, and all the water, whatever else goes into making beer, and it all gets added at once. So even though they're only 40% complete relative to the conversion costs, which are the labor and the overhead, they're completely complete relative to the material costs. So I have that whole 30,000 works its way over. So the equivalent units for materials is 120,000, and I think that's very logical. The conversion costs, however, this 30,000 is not 100% complete relative to the labor and overhead. It's only 40% complete. So we multiply that by 40%, and we get 12,000. So my conversion costs, I have an equivalent unit figure that's significantly different than the materials. It's logical because that's how the materials are added. to the production process. So we'll use these numbers now going forward to work through the remaining requirements.